Welcome, dear students. This session focuses on types and possibilities of changes in English language. I hope and expect by the end of this session, you will have an understanding of what are the possible types and what is the nature of changes that have taken place in English language. Well, my dear students, be it the English language or any other language, language is always changing, evolving, and adapting to the needs of its users. The question arises, is it a good idea or a bad idea that language changes? Well, instead of answering this question, I would just share that had English not changed since 1950s, probably we would not have had the words that refer to, for example, fax or internet or modem or television, etc. This is the process of change in language that has allowed it. This is the flexibility of the language, the possibilities of, adapting to the needs of the users, that new words, for instance, are incorporated in language to help us use for the new items in our daily lives. So, as long as the needs of the users continue changing, language also continues to change. However, most of the times the change is so slow that from year to year we hardly notice it. And actually, this is generally how, all the parents, the speakers of all the languages generally talk about their younger generations, that their children do not speak good language. For instance, the Pakistani parents would say their children have poor Urdu. The native speakers of English would say their children have poor English. So, probably this is how, when we say good or bad, this is the way we look at language. But otherwise, there is nothing as such good or bad about the change in language. In fact, if we go back and if we try to read Shakespeare's writings from the 16th century, change happens over the times, it takes place over the times, and probably we would find them difficult to read. If we go further back, and for instance, as students of literature or language who study English literature or English language, if we try to read Canterbury Tales, for instance, by Chaucer, this is even more difficult. This is very tough. Still going back another 500 years, if we try to read Beowulf, of course, we would find it completely alien language. The question is, why does a language change? Well, there are several reasons. The first is, as I've already pointed out, the needs of the speakers change. This leads to change in language. New technologies, new products, new experiences, new ways of life, changes in the culture, these are all the things that require new words. Consider, for example, texting. Originally, it was called text messaging. However, because it was thought that it allows a person to send a message rather than a voice message, a text message. However, with the passage of time, the term changed to texting. There is another reason why languages change. No two people speak exactly the same language. So, everybody in a way contributes to the language. Think of a huge society of speakers. When everybody is slightly different in the use of language from the other person, how much contributions are made? We all, each one of us, knows a slightly different set of words, a slightly different set of vocabulary, a slightly different, ways of using them, depending upon our job, age, education, our needs, our cultural background, etc. Also, as we interact with people, from there we pick new words and we keep on adding them to our language. So, an individual's language also keep on changing. Every group or subgroup in a society, every culture and every subculture has its own language. Actually, people have group identities that, are shown through, that are reflected through their language choices. Many of the changes that occur in language begin with the young people because they are more creative, and they are more enthusiastic, and because they like to try new things. Some changes die on the way, they are of short span, but some stick to the language and become a part of the language. Another reason why languages change is borrowing. It's not that human beings borrow and lend. Languages also borrow and lend. So, English language has borrowed words like sushi and pizza. Urdu language, for instance, has borrowed a lot of words. In fact, it's a combination of all the borrowings from Persian, from Arabic, and from Sanskrit, etc. As compared to vocabulary, when we consider the nature of changes, word order changes very slowly. Old English word order was far more free than the modern English word order. So, if we compare the old texts, that is confirmed through them. Here is an example from old text translation of Bible, where on the screen you can see the first example in red color, which is translated as, "They toil not." But the later on translations use, "They do not toil." So, this change in the word order shows the change that takes place over the times in word order or in syntax. Today in English, after the verb, not is not used. The sounds of language also change over the times. About 500 years ago, English began to undergo a major vowel shift, change in the pronunciation of vowels, and actually it was a shift in 7 vowel sounds. The question is whether that English that was spoken in the past was more elegant or today's. I think it is difficult to answer the question. The question that we can answer with surety is that definitely it is different. So, for example, pronunciation of Old English from bird to, over the times to the modern word bird. So, today, in those times when somebody would pronounce it as bird, it would be considered incorrect. If today somebody pronounces it as bird, then it would be considered incorrect. This is how change takes place, and it is accepted in the society. And in fact, if we notice carefully, we can see how changes, unnoticeably keep on happening. The use of anymore is another example. In today's world, "I don't smoke anymore" is an expression that is used, which means I don't smoke lately, nowadays. And, it is used in a positive sense now. As young people, you are probably more familiar with expressions like YOLO, which means you only live once, or bromance, that is a brotherly romance, etc. These are the terms that have entered into English language over the times. And why these changes have come? Because, the lifestyle, the culture, the technology has changed the situations. Think of, by the way, the text messaging that you do. It has changed the language a lot, and probably it is going to change the language a lot in the coming days. Anyways, talking of changes in language, the Great Wall shift is one of the most important examples of change, how it takes place very slowly. It took almost, 350 years to complete this particular change of wall shift, and it even went for 100 years unnoticeable. Language will never stop changing. It will continue to respond to the needs of the students, of the learners of language, of the people, of the users of the language. As long as people keep on changing and their needs keep on changing, language would keep on changing.